Hello, my name's Catherine Webster, and for those of you who are following my series, you know that this is very dear to my heart. This is about my girls being in LA and being surrounded by so much corruption and abuse that it defies imagination. For those of you who are just stopping in, this may be your first view. There are other ones to watch. And thank you for your time in stopping in, and also thank you to the other people who have stopped in, because this needs to be brought out and into the light, and that's what I'm trying to do with this, and I'm trying so desperately to get my girls help from without, because there is no help coming from within the state of California. I left off last time with the second hospital visit and a lot of the abuse that had happened during that time period. And I want to go back to that for a little while as far as the second hospital devastating situation. For those of you who have watched before, you know that the security guards had threatened, they had come to the door, I had stood in the door in front of them, and they had threatened to get the LAPD to remove us. And in reliving that and thinking about it later after the show, when you're living it, you're in that moment where you know you have to stay icy calm, because these people are dedicated and committed to bringing it to an escalation where your family is going to be hurt. They're going to be manhandled. They're going to be physically hurt, and that's what they want. And so as I thought about it, I thought, and I try not to think about it because it is so horrific, but it needs to be said, that at that moment in time, these people knowingly, willingly knew that my granddaughter had already gone through an acute cardiac situation a few months before, and she was in the hospital for another situation that was very acute, and that's why we were there that time. And these people deliberately had put my granddaughter in a situation where that could easily happen again. And because so many people were involved in this demonic activity, no one ever stopped and thought, because this was their agenda, no one stopped and thought, how is this affecting this poor little girl? And I know now that if my granddaughter had started into a cardiac arrest, the only person that would have known at that moment would have been my daughter, who was trying to calm her. And because the people in that hospital involved in this were so intent on hurting her, it's surreal. And I realize when you're hearing it, you're thinking, this is so surreal. Well, it was for us. And when I think on it, I think they could have killed my granddaughter right then and there. And what's even more evil is they knew that, and that was their intention, because this is a child who's fragile and had already been in the hospital for another 5 days for another physical incident. It's beyond comprehension. And that is why, when I thought upon it, the rage and the anger and the protectiveness comes out, and you think, I did what I could do in that moment, because that was not the moment to engage. This is what they wanted. There were a lot of them, and they wanted us to engage so that they could take it to another level. They could have killed my granddaughter. They wanted to put their hands on my girls. They wanted to get physical with my daughter. Why in the world, in what dimension can this possibly be allowed? And that is why, even though it seems surreal for people listening, and believe me, when we walked out of that building, it felt surreal to us. But we were in that moment, and we knew it had happened. And you kind of put yourself in a position where we have all this other stuff. We have to forge forward. We know no one's going to touch this hospital. No one's going to care in this state. We know. So we have to kind of put it in the back of our mind. Thank God that she didn't go into an episode, and just pray to God we don't have to go back anytime soon. And it was so horrific and so horrible. And there's really no words. I'm just going to tell you right now, there's no words for the position they put my girls in and my grandchild that day. And she could be dead right now because of them. And they would not have stopped to give her any care. She was in the room with my daughter in the back of the room. I was at the door. They were escalating it. And had she gone into a cardiac arrest, we would have lost her that day like we lost her father years before. No one cared then, and no one cared this time. And when I think upon it, I think in that moment we stayed calm. We did what we had to do, but there was no other calm. There was an energy, a demonic, dark energy that wanted to destroy my family that day. And then, of course, their retaliation, their lies, and their abuse of power when they realized that my daughter had taken video on the way out, not once but twice, to document what was happening. We left there, and as I stated before, when my granddaughter gets upset, she can't articulate it, so she becomes very physically agitated. The cardiac doctor had seen the difference in her immediately when the first hospital visit happened, and he said, I can see the effect this is having on my patient. He was distraught, but it's immediate, because when she gets upset, she can't say, Mom, I'm scared, or this is horrible. She can say some words, but she can't articulate the horror and the fear that they're generating in her. And so when we got outside of this second situation and we were out on the sidewalk, she was very physically agitated. And my daughter and I were trying to calm her down, praying to God that she didn't go into a heart incident outside the hospital, because effectively at that moment, they had already told us in the door, we will get the LAPD to trespass you. Not just me, but my daughter and granddaughter, my disabled granddaughter, trespass us because we had taken too long to leave. Now, they left out the part where they had agitated and instigated and aggravated till time was getting on, and they kept coming in and agitating and aggravating and harassing and attacking. So yeah, time had gone on, but it was their doing. We were getting ready to leave. But even if we did take 20 minutes, in what world, and this is what is so, it's beyond criminal, in another whole realm of criminal. What world do you say this little child is known to have multiple disabilities, just had a cardiac incident a month or two ago, just came in for more blood work up in situation she was in, very fragile. In what world could they ever justify? There is no world where you can justify doing that to a child, and certainly not a disabled child who could die from that kind of aggravation and fear. So we tried to get her calmed down, praying she wouldn't have a heart event right outside of the hospital. And at that point, I had it. Now I'm outside of the hospital, and I'm thinking, now my girls are outside. They're not out of harm's way, but they're outside. And I saw a group of people with a microphone standing on the sidewalk. They were incredibly upset with the hospital as well for different reasons. And I ran over and I said, can I have that microphone? I want to tell the whole world what this place just did to my granddaughter. And they said, no, you can't do it. I went back to my girls and I said, I can't put a light on this right now. We have to keep going. We have to just pray she'll be okay tonight. We have to keep going. And Katie said, let's just leave here, Ma. Let's just leave. We'll take her somewhere. We'll try to get her calmed down. We'll get her a little bite to eat. We had just put in multiple days and nights of fear for my granddaughter, staying up all night. My daughter sleeps in the same bed to keep an eye. I sleep on the little couch. My daughter never got any sleep that whole week. And this is how they treated my girls. So when I say they're surrounded by dark entities and darkness, that is real. That is real. And they are angels in the darkness. They are. Because these people were out to destroy my family that day. They could have easily killed my granddaughter. And I can't stress enough that in that moment, we were trying to talk down the situation and keep it to the point where when you know someone wants to escalate that badly, you know you're very limited in what you're going to be able to do. So you stay icy calm because they want you to do the least little thing. And so there's that, okay, now I have to stay calmer than I've ever been in my life. And we were. And Katie stayed with Michelle and tried to keep her calm. But when they're talking about the police coming in and removing us, the words still seem surreal, but I lived it. We lived it. It happened. And it's so beyond criminal behavior. It goes into another whole realm. And that is why, to me, and I know this to be true, and this is true of all these dark entities out there, they can't stand the light. They hide in the shadows. No one says anything. No one does anything. They continue with their rampage. They can't stand the light. And that's what I'm trying to do, put a light on this. And there's someone out there who can put a bigger, brighter light out on it. Because no help is coming from within. It's going to have to come from without too, because so many of them in that state are invested in this. This is what they do. And I don't know if anyone else has ever been in that position that we were in that day. I was told no, they had never seen anything like that before, ever. I don't know if it's happened anywhere else, but it happened that day, and it happened to us. And it was so traumatizing. And yet we had to keep going, because at that point, we had to try to find housing. And the girls were still in the apartment at that point. We were in the apartment looking at lockout. And that was April 1st. And of course, I discussed the fact that the landlord, the slumlord, the demonic entity, threw my son-in-law's ashes in the trash is a final deliberate act of hatred to my girls. I also want to point out that the eviction was expunged from my daughter's record like it never happened, because it was all so deliberately done to just make them homeless. And this is the agenda. Shortly after that, and we had dealt with the whole getting the motel, and Willie had been thrown out of the hospital, and so we took him to the hotel. There was no other way. He would have been on the street, not even in a wheelchair. They weren't going to provide a wheelchair, just put him out. And at that point, we're looking at apartments and rent, and every apartment we would look at, we would take Michelle. I mean, obviously, you want to be upfront. You want to say, listen, we have a situation where we have 3 people. It's a small family. 2 are disabled. I would say it's not for me, but it's for my girls and Willie. We just need a small place. And we would take Michelle because, of course, we had to take Michelle. Michelle needs constant care. So then it became very clear the disability prejudice of landlords, and not just the one they had just, the slumlord they just left, who had just attacked and thrown them out, but future landlords who would look at the situation and say, no, we don't want disabled. So we take what we can get. You know, Willie can go upstairs. He's fighting to do this. We don't need a lift. We don't need accommodation. We'd like accommodation. We don't need it. We just want to get in somewhere. Well, you're going to want something. We don't want to invest in it. You're going to want something. And so we wouldn't hear back. It was very clear. They did not want to help disabled people, not my granddaughter and not Willie. And we hadn't asked for any accommodation at all. Now, under the law that doesn't exist there, there's supposed to be accommodation. There's supposed to be HUD housing where my family could have a disability ramp, a wheelchair accessibility. There's supposed to be that under the law. But we have to remember, in California, it is the Middle Ages. It's like the laws that were passed that are on the books don't exist. They're there, but if no one's going to enforce them and no one's going to adhere to them, then they basically don't exist. And that's kind of the thread through the whole of LA that I experienced, was that disability accessibility is not something that they have any interest in, and just consider it something that's optional. It's not on the books in their mind. This is something that they can do or not do, and you can complain and you can be upset, but who's going to listen? Who's going to care? No one. At that point, we decided there wasn't enough income for an apartment. And my granddaughter's Social Security had been stolen from her a few years before. And they literally owe my granddaughter thousands upon thousands of dollars in back benefits. However, we said we don't even care about that. We know we're not going to get that. We're not going to fight for that. We just want her reinstated. So began our journey to the Social Security office, which is a little way from where we were. It's a couple of bus rides and a little bit of walking. But to us at that point, several people in the family being disabled and also so demoralized and so exhausted from everything that had happened, mentally, physically exhausted. My daughter said, let's try, Mom. We'll just try. We'll get on the buses, we'll go. We'll try to, we don't know what's going to happen one day to the next, but we got to try to get this back. So we got on a bus. Now I want to specify that if you have a wheelchair, they may or may not accommodate you. But the vast majority of people on the bus have no concern and no patience with anyone in a wheelchair, and the animosity is you can cut it with a knife. The animosity is they don't want to be stopped in their plans for the day. And stopping for a wheelchair or stopping for a disabled child to get on, you can feel the tension and the frustration, and we have to stop for this person. It's a very strong prejudice out there that I encountered, very strong. We get on the bus, we get on another bus, we walk a ways, and we get to the Social Security office. And you go through the security and all of that. You sit there, you wait. Finally, because this wasn't that long after the second hospital visit, so we're all exhausted. My granddaughter's exhausted. We're trying to keep her calm. Finally, we go in to a back room and we meet with this woman. And she's sitting behind this little window. There's like a blind on top of it where she could pull it up and pull it down. So she pulled it up and we're looking through the window. And immediately her energy was, I don't care about you. I don't want you here. I don't even want to do this job. I don't want you here. I don't want to do this. So we're trying to overlook it, even though we know the energy and we've experienced it so many times before. And we thought, well, we've come all this way. We've got to try. So immediately out of this woman's mouth becomes this very abusive tone. Everything she said to my daughter was cutting, biting, and just borderline hostile. So she's asking my daughter all these questions, and then my daughter's trying to answer them. And she's like, how much does your daughter weigh? And my daughter said, well, it fluctuates. We were at the hospital. She weighed a certain thing. You don't know what she weighs right now? She goes, well, I didn't weigh her this morning. Okay, so you don't know that about your daughter. Okay, then there were more questions, more antagonistic behavior, more hostility, more combativeness. And at one point I said, you really need to work on your people skills. Okay, we've come in here. Clearly my daughter, is trying her best. Why can't you just calm your tone down? Why do you have to be so aggravated? We're trying to get something done here. And she said, you know what, if you don't like my tone, how about I just get the security guard? And I said, you know what? I've had enough. Why don't you? Why don't you go get him? No one's done anything to you. No one's done anything, okay? Go get him. Because now we're not in the hospital setting. We're in Social Security. And I know that there's going to be some kind of supervisor somewhere. I'm not sure how this is going to pan out, but I've had enough. I've had enough. And I said, you can calm down. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving my girls. I'm not going anywhere. But this is what they do. If they don't like your tone, they can treat you any way they want. But if they don't like your tone, they're going to get security. It's so abusive. You can't even comprehend that these people literally say and do what they want, but when you say anything back, even in the calmest fashion, they use the power, they use the distorted power to bring in security, to try to make it look like you've done something. And it was becoming so commonplace at that point that I just expected it now. I thought, I don't have to do anything. They're going to call security. However, I've had it. We need to get this done. We've already come all this way. And those bus rides are tiring and upsetting. If everyone was in perfect health and everything, the buses aren't fun to take out there. But when you've been through what my girls have been through, what we've been through as a family, getting on those buses and going, you've got to plan to have enough energy to get through this. Because when you get back, you've probably got someone at the motel that's going to say, you have to leave tomorrow morning because we booked it to someone else and we don't have a room for you. So we were trying to plan to keep that safe. That was the number one priority. Keep Michelle with a roof over her head at all costs. Everything else kind of has to go back over here. And then when we can, and we know we have a couple of days in the room, we can adjust to go here. But we can't just come here every day. We can't just hope we get someone that has any humanity or knows how to do their job. We got this one shot. We got this one shot to do this. And so after I said go get them, she just continued. She didn't go get them, but she did continue to do these rapid fire questions at my daughter. Do you know this? Do you know that? What's her height? What's her... All these, nothing about her doctor visits, nothing about her disabilities. These obscure questions that the doctor's notes would have said. And so Katie's getting tearful. She's getting so frustrated because clearly the abuse just never ends. And she's looking at me like, Mom, we got to continue with this no matter how bad it gets because we need this. Michelle deserves to have this. And at one point, the woman said, okay, I suppose that's enough. You don't have anything you need. You don't know anything about your own daughter. And I said, that's not true. That's very abusive. That's not right. Don't say that to my daughter. Don't say that. She knows everything about her child. We didn't know what you would ask. We don't have everything picture perfect, but we have a huge amount of doctor's notes and paperwork. And so that's not accurate. You don't have to be that way. The thing with me, I don't swear, I don't threaten. That's what they want. They want it so badly. And so you have to rein yourself in and you have to say, in order to get from point A to point B, this is what we have to do here. And at that point she said, have Michelle sign a paperwork. Just sign it. Really rudely, really very with a great hostility. And Katie said she can't write her name. And the woman said, she can't write her name? Why can't she write her name? Katie said, because she has learning disabilities and learning difficulties, she can't write her name. Has she ever been inside a school? And, you know, at that point, you're thinking, I'm losing what little patience I had. I'm going to have to remove myself from this situation right off the bat here. I can't. And Katie's looking at me like, I've had enough. I can't. Now we're abusing Michelle. The whole thing is going off on Michelle now, and that's where it's going to really tip the whole scales. Katie and I, we put up with it, but if someone starts addressing Michelle or attacking Michelle, that's it. And, well, if she's been inside a school, she should know how to write her name. Now, this is Social Security office. This is clearly a disabled child. And Katie said she can't write her name. And yes, she's been to school, but it was special ed school. Many kids can't write their name. It doesn't mean they haven't been inside a school, and she just can't write it. And the woman said, well, take her hand then. Take her hand and make her make an X on the paper. And, you know, my hair started on fire. I said, I'm going to have to remove myself right off the bat, or I'm going to be, you know, the security guard's going to have to come in here and get me. This is too much. And you're having to keep yourself together. You're having to. And Katie said, all right, give me your hand, honey, and let's just do this. So Michelle went like this. And then the woman took the paper and said, that's an X. And Katie said, that's what you asked her to do. That's all she can do. She goes, I'm done with this. Ripped the paper up. Said, we're done. And pulled the curtain down. And Katie looked at me in the horror and the frustration and the tears. She said, I can't do this, Mom. I just can't do this. This is too much. Now they're taking off on Michelle. I can't do this. I can't do this. They're picking on Michelle. I said, okay, that's it. We gathered ourselves up and went to another window, and I said, get a supervisor here now. And that's when my daughter said, I want 2 supervisors. I want this one and that one. She knew some of the people there. She said, get them out here now. I've had enough. I've had enough of this. We're under enough stress. Get them out here. The way they just treated my daughter, it's not going to be acceptable. Get them out here. So now my daughter, I'm kind of over here, and she's like taking over. So I'm done. I'm done, Mother. This is it. I can't take any more of this crap. It's too much. And so the supervisor came out and stood behind another window, and we described the situation. My daughter described the situation. And I'm, you know, keeping Michelle calm as we could. And the supervisor brought another supervisor over to the window, and they said, oh yeah, that's how she is. We're sorry about that. She can get that way. That's how she is. And my daughter said, it's not acceptable. I don't care how she is. I don't care how she is. It took us a long time to get down here. My daughter's not even out of the hospital that long. We can't just come down here and be treated like this. We need a resolution to this. We need help with this. Okay, we're dealing with a lot. And then we come in here and she makes my daughter make an X, and then she rips the paper up. You know, the demoralizing, not just abuse, it's more than abuse. You're purposely targeting a child, insinuating a child who does have limitations, had never stepped foot in a school when she had gone to school for many, many, many years. It was, you know, special ed. Millions of children go to special ed. There's never an excuse to harm a child. A disabled child, they're on another level where they can't defend themselves at all. The people around them have to. And we're having the paper ripped up in front of our face, which my daughter just went through huge amount of labor to get done, with that hostile, horrible woman And I said, is there any place in this town that's not demonic? Is everyone like this? Everyone, because that's all I see in all these agencies. Well, that's how she is. I don't think she even wants to be here. I said, yeah, we knew that when we came in. Why can't we get somebody else? Why can't we see somebody who has some kindness, some consideration? Why can't we find somebody to treat us like the woman that was over there with the other woman who's getting treated kindly? And this, we can take a lot. We're sensitive people. We're not hypersensitive to words. We're not hypersensitive to action. We're not hypersensitive. This is where, when you're systematically abused from every agency you go to, and this is the way you're treated constantly. You're sensitive to the energies because you know what's coming, and you do your best to get out in front of it and get around that because you know what's coming. And still it ends in a total disaster where she just decides, I'm done. I didn't want to do this to begin with. And ripped up the paper and just blocked us out with that blind. Like, you're nothing, you're nobody. I just made that little disabled child make an X. And now I'm just going to rip the paper up anyway. So everything we thought we accomplished was gone. And so the supervisor said, now you have to start over, which Katie said, we can't do that today. We gotta go home and rest. We can't do that today. Michelle's tired. And we gotta go home. We can't do this again. And so they said, well, if you do come back in, we'll get you someone else. And then we'll just take your doctors. Now, this is something that is so... My grandbaby was born in Cedars-Sinai with disabilities. Her whole life she's had these disabilities, and Social Security knows it. But they will hand out Social Security to other grown-ups that actually have no right and no reason. But my grandbaby, who clearly is disabled, who has been cheated out of all her Social Security for many years, that's the person they're going to treat like that. That's why the light is going on these people. It's going on these people, and there's a light out there that's even brighter. So at this point, I'm trying to contact someone in the Social Security office who's way above the one in California. Because the people in California, this is how they do this, and they're not held to any kind of standard. This is what, I actually had a lawyer a little later on tell me everyone's treated like that when they go in there. That's kind of par for the course. I said, that's our experience, and that's not good enough. I don't accept that. I don't accept that. And I said, I don't believe everybody is, because the woman that was beside us getting an interview was treated very kindly, respectfully. All we wanted was some respect. That's all we asked for, was some respect. So we went back to the motel room. As we always did, we're very cognizant of Michelle's mood and what could make her feel overly stressed again. So we stepped away from it, put it in the back of our mind, and said, we'll try another day. And went and got her a little donut and tried to, walk and visit and shake, put your little hand together and walk down the street and kind of make her understand it's going to be all right, it's going to be okay. And then my daughter and I would look at each other, and my daughter would be so devastated because this is all so purposeful. And this is why my angels are in the darkness. They're completely in a dark place because they're surrounded by these dark entities. At that point, I had been in contact with the so-called regional center since the fall before this, talking to this one person. And she's the one that said, we'll get this sorted. We'll find a place. So now fast forward to after the visit, and I say visit, debacle. horrendous abuse at the SSI office. And I call her and I say, listen, we're fighting to get to Social Security. That's not working out. We need the income to get the apartment. And she said to me, and at that point I was on a bus on Sunset. I was on a bus. Bus was full of people. And she said to me, we found housing for your granddaughter, just not for her mother. And I screamed, are you out of your effing mind? Over my dead body, over my daughter's dead body. I said, if you can find housing for my granddaughter, then you need to find it for her mother. What in the world are you playing at now? Everyone on the bus just kept their heads down because I'd had enough. Now I'm losing my ability to cope with this. I said, so let me get this straight. She loses her father in front of her. He dies in front of her as a little toddler, 4 or 5. She loses the only home she's ever known because she came home from the hospital to this apartment house, so she'd been there her whole life, and now they're thrown out of there. Then her father's ashes are thrown in the trash, and she knows that, but can't articulate her grief, and her mother's grieving for that as well. And now you want to separate her from her mother, the only person who knows her at all, like right to her bones, that she knows the bones of her daughter. She's her mother, the one person on earth she relies on the most, that she has her own little communication language with. And Katie can tell way out ahead if she's not feeling well because Michelle tells her in her own little way. And you're telling me that you think that that is something you could do. You're telling me that you can't find a place for both. This was before I even brought Willie into it. Now I'm just thinking of Michelle and Katie. I said, are you trying to kill my granddaughter? Are you trying to kill her too? What is wrong with you people? You're insane. It's not happening. My granddaughter has family that loves her dearly. She's everything. It's not happening. So you figure something else out. You get something else figured out today. That's not happening. We already have children. It's just till their mother finds. We already have children. We do that with. Their mothers find an apartment, we give them back. I'm like, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. Over my dead body, over my daughter's dead body. You know, they wail and cry and whinge about families being broken up. That's all you ever hear. We don't want families broken up. We'll move heaven and earth to make sure certain families aren't broken up. But my family, they have actively tried to destroy my family. Actively for years. And now this last 2 years, they have done everything in their power to destroy my family and separate them. It's not going to happen. I'm putting a light on this. Certain families, they will go die on any hill for certain families to be together. But my family, that seemed like an option for my family, for a little child who relies on her mother so heavily. That's her mother. The one person she's got left, she lost her father. That's the one person she's got left. I said, that doesn't even make any sense. It's not going to happen. There's something wrong with you to think that's going to happen. It's not going to happen. My daughter's taking beautiful care of her. In spite of all this stress, Michelle is everything to us. Everything. She's the first and only priority here. So don't think that you're going to pull this nonsense on us. It's not going to happen. That's only an option. I said, no, it's not an option. It's not an option. Do your job. You get a paycheck, a big paycheck. Do your job for once and find something for my girls. And this is at the point when we were trying to see if they could get something with Willie. But at that point, we were told Willie wasn't family. And I don't know, their definition of family, when Willie has been there for my girls for years and helped them and made sure they were okay and stuff, he's my family. He's my family because they're his family. He helps my girls, he's my family. That's how that works. And where I come from, that's how it is. And we don't allow people to hurt our families. From the people I come from, take that very seriously. And I had to watch this and be involved in it the whole time. Just absolute despicable behavior from these agencies. Agencies. Always the agencies. You're never safe in the agencies. You're not safe in Social Security. You're not safe at the courthouse. You're not safe at the hospital. The one place I felt safe was the streets. The streets. And at 5 o'clock at night, it got dark because it was still winter, spring. And I would go out on the streets, and it might seem incredible to some people. It might seem romanticized. It's not. There is almost kind of an energetic, metaphysical thing about it, though. It's almost as if you get out on the streets and you've been so abused and so battered by these agencies, and then you walk up to someone on the street and it's like a little spark of light, a little spark. There's a little angelic light sparking. And that person says, "How are you?" And you say, "How are you? I understand what you're going through. Yes, I know you're kind of in a similar..." They knew there's a feeling of, I know what you're going through. They can feel your pain. There's a camaraderie there. There's a feeling of, I'm down. I know when someone else is down. I know when your heart is breaking. I know, I can feel it. I actually made friends on the street. People that thought I was helping them, they'll never know how much they were helping me. They'll never know how in that moment when they were kind, when they didn't have to be, they had nothing. Maybe sitting on a wheelchair, maybe sitting on the curb, everything they ever had in life beside them, maybe nothing beside them. And they had the humanity to say, "How are you? Yeah, I know you're hurting." Total strangers. And I'd say, yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. I'm seeing my family go through the worst possible situations, and it's bad. And they'd say, "You know what?" Because they'd know my name. I would tell them my name. And they'd say, "You know, Kathy, it's going to get better. It's going to get better." These people had no reason to say that to me, other than the fact that all through those streets, little lights were sparking. Little tiny beams of light sparking in the dark. I never once felt afraid on the streets. And I know some people might say, "Oh, you're so naive. Anything could have happened." Sure, anything could have happened. That's true. I won't deny anything could have happened. Somebody could have driven by and shot me. I don't know. But when you're in that kind of despair, and you have to go get some groceries, and you have to take care of your family, and you're trying your best to be supportive, and then you walk upon somebody, and it's a homeless person, and they've got their one possession out in the sidewalk, and you go to walk by, and they move it and go, "I got you, babe. It's okay. Go by." I was like, "Have a good night." I knew they wouldn't have a good night, but I had to say something back. These are you know, and I'm not, how do I describe the energy? When you find the most kindness from people that have nothing on the street. And I've never adhered to that foolishness that psychologists and psychiatrists say, you know, poverty breeds the worst type of people. Well, actually, I don't believe that at all. The greatest generation we ever produced in this country, or after the Civil War, after the Revolution, grew up in the Great Depression. My grandmother had 13 kids. My grandmother and grandfather had 13 kids in the Depression. And not one of them ever saw the inside of a jail cell or was anything but a great parent and a great provider. Poverty doesn't spawn anything. These people had nothing. Character is not built on possessions. Character is not built on acquiring. Sensitivity and compassion are not built on how much stuff you have. This is a lie that society perpetuates. And also, I would ask anybody to think, too, the next time you're looking at someone who's homeless and you've thought, well, the narrative's true, they're mentally ill, they're addicted. They want that narrative to play out, so you're afraid of people. So it's easy to forget people. But I want you just to say to yourself, how did she do that then? How did she walk down on Sunset, Virgil, whatever, all these people in tents? Why? Because I didn't believe it. I don't believe that's true at all. I don't believe the narrative. I believe the homeless people are people. And some of them have a backstory of violence, and some of them have a backstory of addiction. But then there's people that live in million-dollar mansions that are high all the time, or God knows what violent. So it's not about acquiring something. It's about who's got the compassion, who's got that light in them. And every time I walk down that street, I would walk by someone and that little spark of light would spark, and I'd see it. And I'd say, having a hard time, huh? They'd be like, oh, yeah, you don't know. And I'd say, yeah, I do. Well, yeah, maybe you do. And they'd recognize right away. But they thought they were helping. I was helping them, but actually they didn't realize that in those moments where they sparked and there was that recognition and that kindness, even if they just got out of the way, even if they just didn't make things worse, even if they'd say, have a good night, darling. To feel a little bit of kindness in that moment. And I want you to understand, these are mostly all your fellow Americans. Because the people that aren't are being cared for. They're being taken care of. They are being taken care of. So the people that you're meeting on the street are either trying legally to be here, and I have more stories about my friend that I made. That's next week, a very kind man from another country who had tried for 5 years to get here. This is about looking at people in another way and saying, you know, how did she do that? Why wasn't she afraid? I wasn't afraid of anybody on those streets. I recognized immediately their energy. I had a homeless fellow that every time I'd go to the 7-Eleven, he'd open the door for me. He didn't have to do that. He'd say, have a good night. He had nothing in this world, nothing. It's like they almost knew, she's going through so much right now. I'm not gonna do anything but be kind. And that's what they were. They were kind. And some people might think, she just got lucky and she's romanticizing it. It wasn't that. I don't romanticize any of this. I don't romanticize anything in life, really, but I know what I know, and I know what I felt. And it was the homeless that actually were the kindest and most compassionate people that I personally had experienced. And some of the people that run the hotels were nice and kind. One in particular tried to make sure that we always had a place and we didn't have to move around in the motel too much. That was a very kind family. There was another motel where the people were just horrible, and I'll get into that next week. My girls need that Social Security back in order to afford, but they need to afford to get more stable. At no point has my granddaughter, and this is what the state wanted, she has to physically have her feet on the ground and be homeless before we'll make a move to do anything. And HUD housing is 5 years off. So there's no disability housing for her. It's 5 years. Somebody's in that housing. Somebody's in that disability housing. And that should be for the people that are the most vulnerable and the most needy. And to go to Willie again, the way Willie's been treated is horrendous. My girls do the absolute best they can for him. My daughter is so loyal and so true blue to making sure he gets his insulin and everything. I don't want to make it sound like every homeless person I met had been born here. They weren't. But they had tried so much and so long to be here appropriately. I don't want anybody to mistake what I'm saying. I don't care a rat's ass about any political stance. All I care about is what my girls, under the law, legally deserve to get as American citizens and as people who have tried legally to get what is legally supposed to be in place for them. So if anyone wants to read anything else into this, it's not there. My girls should be at the top of the list, not the bottom of the barrel. That's something that infuriates me terribly. This never should have happened to my girls. Something should have been in place to help so that this never happened. But this was in place on purpose to make it happen because there's a certain segment of people. This is the truth. This is the truth. A certain population of people are put ahead of U.S. citizens on purpose, and that is the priority. And that is wrong. That is wrong. And it's not my intention to get political in this situation, but that is wrong. And my girls need the help, and I'm hoping this puts a light on the fact that California's loyalties, well, what they are is filthy hypocrites and liars. All those agencies are filthy hypocrites and liars. They say they care about families. They don't. They don't care about families. They care about certain families that they want to care about. And everybody else knows the truth in California that other than that, they don't care. Everyone in California knows the truth. I lived it. I know. There were people that were trying to come here legally from different countries that I met. And they knew the truth and said, I've been here 5 years. I'm sleeping in Echo Park. They found a one-bedroom for someone who got here 5 minutes ago. Okay, political? I don't care. The truth. It's the truth. If the truth is political, then it's the political, but it's the truth. This person had tried for 5 years to come in here legally. And he was sleeping with his dog in Echo Park, being beat up all the time, when he had tried to do it the right way. So the truth is the truth. And my girls, I'm trying my hardest to put a light on this because there's no help from within. This is such a demonic system we're talking about, where they deliberately break up families on purpose and then deliberately cry and scream and wail about other families being broken up. Their priorities are so completely flipped at this point. It's a horrible place to be. It's a horrible place to experience. Everyone there knows it, if they're honest. Everyone that lives in LA County knows the truth. Whether they'll admit it or not, they have to know the truth. It's in your face. You have to know the truth. There's no getting around it. If you have eyes in your head, you know what you're looking at. It's done on purpose. They break certain families up with impunity and then turn around and say, all we care about is families being together. It's not right, families. But when they're destroying the families, they're fine with it. It's my fight to bring attention to this, but also to get someone from outside to make the Social Security office do the right thing and get my granddaughter's Social Security back so that they'll have the income, the extra income they need to get the apartment, because that's her right to have that, and they stole it illegally. And I have more stories about the homeless, and I'm not, this is my life experience, so however it comes off, it comes off. But this is what I lived, and so much of it made me so angry and so upset and so... It's happening to my family, of course, so that's near and dear to my heart. But it also opened my eyes to the horrific abuse of the disabled in that county overall, although they've taken special attention to try to destroy my family, but they've destroyed other families living in cars on the street, waiting to get into housing because someone they prioritized got into housing. Never should a child be facing the street. Never should a disabled child be facing the street. Never should. And my daughter makes sure she's not, but she's tired, she's exhausted. With a single parent, widowed woman, so courageous. My heart swells with such pride for my girl. And my grandbaby, who also, things are so hard for her, but she has that ready little smile. She's always ready to laugh and giggle. She's so precious. I tell the world this because it's true. And it became so clear to me when I was out there that true change has to come from without. Because that state is ghastly ill, terribly ill. It wasn't always this way. It wasn't always that bad. When my daughter first went out, I had a different experience. She had a different experience. There were times when there was happy times. And there was happy memories. And I'll discuss some more of that in my next show so that I can put a kind of even a more balanced situation on this, because people might say, if it's always been this bad, it wasn't always this bad. There were other people running the state when she first went out there. There was situations that weren't good, but the state has degenerated now into complete, total demonic disarray. And someone from without needs to put a huge light on this. And of course, that's my intention, to get someone out there to listen to this. And anyone that is listening, it would mean the world to me if you watch this, if you would download it to someone else so they could download it to someone else, because it's not about the views. If 1 million people watch it, that's wonderful. Maybe they can feel differently about a homeless person when they see them, or maybe they can feel what I'm feeling and say, that's really terrible. Have a visceral reaction to what's going on with my family so they can know that their humanity is intact. But maybe the right person will hear, and then they can put the light on it that needs to be lit up, and maybe this can be resolved for my family. And that's my dearest hope, that will happen. All right, thank you for your time on this. Thanks for stopping in, and of course next week, another episode. Thank you.